Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope from wherever you're joining us across the world, you're having a good day and you are in a recovery mode because right here in East Africa, we are in a recovery mode, recovery from the pandemic. For example, here in Kenya, where I'm specifically Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, we just had a curfew lifted. So people are very eager looking up or looking forward to Fridays, which is quite interesting. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another webinar session on by Africa Review, actually in partnership with in association rather with BVI Finance. My name is Noki Kimboy. And today we will have quite an interesting conversation in regards to scaling East African businesses. If you've been faithful enough, then you understand that we've been having these sessions, the West Africa version, the South African version, and now we are at the heart of Africa. We call it the East African region. How are we able to scale up our businesses, especially coming from a pandemic period where we've seen massive disruptions in supply chain, massive disruptions in business, and seeing technology revolutionizing how we do business and even do life in general. I mean, we're here doing a webinar, and this will be unthought of pre-COVID-19. It wouldn't be top of our mind, but I'm glad we're able to join and engage. Well, today we have quite a rich panel. And by the word rich, I mean experience and expertise. Well, if you see the poster, we had quite an array of speakers, starting with Nicholas Kuria, who is a counsel at Conyers rather. Then we had Ahmed Hada, who is the CFO of Lafarge Holcim. And unfortunately, he had a personal situation to handle, so he was not able to join us today. But I assure you, we got a perfect replacement to make sure that our questions are addressed. Also, we were supposed to have Mr. Melaku Kebede, who is the CEO of Hybrid Bank from Ethiopia. And unfortunately, also due to personal reasons, he was not able to attend this particular webinar and this session on how we can scale East African businesses. But I believe we have people from Ethiopia and we'll be having a Q&A session. So be ready to shoot your questions, and especially in your jurisdiction. If you're from Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, open session, and I'll be checking out those questions. We'll be addressing them later on. We also have today with us, we have Mr. Shami Kinswaga, who's the CFO, Exim Bank, and Marty Gilbert, partner Maples Group, not forgetting Agnes Gitau, who is a partner at GBS Africa. So without wasting much time, it is the East African CxO Roundtable, Scaling East African Businesses. At this particular moment, I'd like to welcome my panelists. I'd like them to give a short introduction of who they are and what they do. I'll start with Nicholas Kuria from Conyers. Nicholas, please, a brief introduction.
Thank you, Noah. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you today, and thanks for having me on the panel. As you said, I'm Nick Kuria. I'm an attorney at Conyers, Dillon Pearman in the BVI. I work in the corporate and finance team at Conyers, working offshore mostly. I also head up the firm's Africa practice group, which is why I have an interest in today's discussion. Prior to my time at Conyers, I was a practicing solicitor in London at Slaughter & May, and as well as CMS Cameron McKenna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nicholas. Quite an array of expertise and experience right there, and I hope we'll be able to tap into that. Next, I'd like to introduce Shani Kinswaga, CFO, Exim Bank. Mr. Kinswaga, the stage is yours for introductions.
Thank you, Noah. My name is Shani Kinswaga. I work with Exim Bank. Exim Bank is the Tanzania's first international bank. We have operations also in Djibouti, Komoro, and Uganda. I'm an accountant by profession, but I've also practiced as a tax consultant before. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we'll be getting perspectives from Tanzania. Actually, I was told you don't say Tanzania. Foreigners have that problem. It is Tanzania, not Tanzania. All right, with that said, I'd like to introduce a fellow country person, Agnes Gitau, partner GBS Africa. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Noah, and thank you, BVI and Africa Review, for hosting this conversation on East Africa. It's always a pleasure to share our expertise on the region. Agnes Gitau, I work for GBS Africa. We're an advisory services firm where we support businesses manage political and economic risks associated in Sub-Saharan Africa. My background is trade and finance, but I also have an interest in arbitration. We've been very involved in supporting arbitration practice in East Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agnes Gitau from GBS Africa. And on board, actually, as I told you earlier on, we had some of our speakers had to attend to some personal issues, but I believe East Africa is always ready. And when there's an opportunity, somebody is ready to pounce on that. Bringing on board right now, it's quite an experienced fella, Isaac Lipuleka, who's the head of finance, Tanga Cement, public limited company. Isaac, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Noah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Isaac, the head of finance of Tanga Cement, public limited company, one of the largest cement manufacturer in Tanzania. In terms of my career, actually, I also worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers and some other companies as well, including Telecom. I'm very glad to meet you today, and it's my pleasure as my first interaction with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac, for that. Actually, talking about cement, we've seen the construction sector amidst the COVID-19 pandemic has been quite vibrant. Locally here in Kenya, it has been quite interesting, but that notwithstanding, we also have quite an experienced gentleman, and Marty Gilbert, who is a partner at Maples Group. Please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon from London, everyone. I'm a finance partner at Maples. We're a large global legal and corporate services provider. My work as finance and corporate partner in London often involves assisting financing of ventures into the African region, and we'll talk a little more during this webinar about some of the detail of what we see and what we get involved in. So it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Marty, for that. So without wasting much time, we have an hour to address quite a myriad of issues touching on East Africa and scaling businesses in this particular region. I'll start on a legal standpoint. I want to bring in Nicholas Courier. And Nicholas, at this particular moment, the continent is focused on, there is power in numbers. There's a continent that has been one of the issues that has worked quite to our disadvantage. Come to think of it, we haven't been united on matters trade. That's why there was the idea of African Continental Free Trade Area, where we amalgamate and form a trading bloc. And it's proving to be something quite different. So how can international finance centers, and we've seen in the introduction, where we are having people with experience in different jurisdictions. So how can these financial, international financial centers, like, for example, the BVI, assist to maximize the benefits of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to the core? Nicholas.
Thank you, Noah. As I said, obviously a pleasure to be speaking to you today, and I'm pleased to have a diverse panel to speak with, and people actually involved in businesses within Africa. So hopefully this resonates with them as well. As you rightly point out, the creation of the African Continental Free Trade Area represents a tremendous opportunity to boost development and growth in the region. The creation of that vast local market within Africa, the vast regional market within Africa, as a potential we see to enhance and promote and encourage even more foreign direct investment for the long-term growth and development of the region. And as you rightly ask, so where do we see the BVI fitting in within that sort of scenario? And where we think we sit very well is as a platform for foreign direct investment into the continent, now that there's this commonality and this strength in numbers, as you put it. And the way in which we see that happening is in several ways, one of which is the BVI's expertise and standing as a very effective platform for international joint ventures, for example. And what we mean by international joint ventures is essentially bringing together parties from different jurisdictions with a view to investment within the continent. You're bringing parties from different jurisdictions. They're looking to exploit economic opportunities within the continent. And the BVI has very well respected and provides a very well-trodden path in terms of providing vehicles for pooling investment and resources for deployment onto the continent. And this can happen in a number of ways. I mean, the spectrum of the range is from putting together a club of institutional investors who are all based outside the continent. Institutional investors, multinational corporations looking to invest in an efficient manner within the continent, and that could be deployed in local businesses. It could be development projects. And it could also be a structure whereby you have local investors, so local African businesses, local investors, looking to partner up with international investors in a platform where there's familiarity, certainly on the international side, with investing in or via BVI vehicles. So BVI is very well set up in terms of being able to accommodate either of those scenarios and anything in between. So we have a very well-trodden path, a very deep well of expertise in dealing with financing into the continent. Historically, we'd like to see that grow in the future. And we see this as a fantastic opportunity and a good juncture in a moment of time to really put the message out there in terms of what the BVI can offer in terms of structures and vehicles for implementing development. There are certain key pillars to the BVI model. I will touch on some of them, and I believe Matthew, my colleague, will also be discussing some of these in his session. But one of the key pillars that we believe really enhances the BVI proposition is neutrality. And that can be thought of in two aspects. The first is tax neutrality. So for those who may not be aware, there are no taxes or duties assessed in the BVI on a BVI company or its international investors. There may, of course, be taxes assessable against a BVI company onshore in the ordinary course. For example, when a BVI company owns assets or has business activities in a particular jurisdiction, it may be liable to taxation in that jurisdiction, or where the international investors are resident for tax purposes, or otherwise liable to pay tax. International investors will face tax liabilities potentially in those jurisdictions. The other aspect of neutrality is what I tend to term more commercial neutrality, and this you can look at the stereotypical example of a joint venture involving, for example, on the one side, a US investor, and on the other, a Chinese or European investor. In that scenario, neither one of those parties would want to be giving up home field advantage when they're looking to invest. And here's where the BVI has always provided a neutral third jurisdiction in which both parties can be comfortable with a robust judicial system behind it, an independent court system, English law-based legal system, and fundamentally a jurisdiction in which neither of those two parties have described would have particular influence. So there's no concession in terms of giving away home field advantage to your joint venture partner. We see that, allied to that, we see the BVI focusing and continuing to operate as a conduit for development finance in the region. So, as I mentioned before, pulling together investment from all corners of the world. We have great experience of doing that historically, and we'd like to see that grow. And we'd like to see that sort of evolve, not just in sort of a public and private partnership, but also see more private sector investment coming in, and also partnering up with local investors, using BVI vehicles in a very efficient manner to do that. at the moment we see ourselves, we sit as sort of a bridge between what you might term the developed world and obviously the developing world and countries in Africa. And we just want to ensure that people are aware of the availability of these structures and how they can be used to present an investment proposition globally that is familiar to investors, familiar to regulators around the world. And that sort of familiarity helps to sort of mitigate the perceived risk of any investment. So that's where the BVI sits quite well. I thought I'd also touch on briefly developments in the BVI with regard to financial technology. And we now have a framework called a regulatory sandbox, essentially allowing businesses to trial new products in financial technology. I know this has been quite topical in East Africa, in particular in Kenya as well. We have a framework which allows companies, both local BVI companies, international companies, to trial products in financial services which are designed to be innovative and provide solutions and new products with a sort of light touch regulatory framework supervised by the BVI Financial Services Commission, which is the regulator here in the BVI. It's for a limited period only of 18 months, but you can extend that to by 6 months going forward. And at the end of the period, you can either proceed to become a fully licensed financial services provider, or you can cease operations. So it's one other aspect that we have, which we use in the BVI, looking forward in terms of what are the key drivers for growth. And we see financial technology being one of those pillars for growth in the future. So hopefully it provided a flavor of why it is we think the BVI is relevant to the African question. Obviously very happy to field any questions that the panel may have, or if the audience has any questions, we can obviously discuss that as well.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Quite a detailed analysis of, the role of international financials in investing and enabling the Africa Continental Free Trade Area in this particular jurisdiction. But I want to bring it locally, especially within East Africa itself. Shani Kinswaga, I know you operate from Tanzania and you have branches in different countries within the region, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I mean, this vehicle, how critical is it in facilitating trade across the continent? And maybe start with the East African region. So far, what this particular vehicle, Africa Continental Free Trade Area, is. How will it facilitate better trade relations within the East African region?
Thank you, Noah. Just also with a bit of for background is that the objectives of the African Continental Free Trade Area is that to have progressive reduction of tariffs and non-tariff barriers with the aim to eventually eliminate these across the continent. I was doing when I was doing my research, I came across data by Trade Law Center, and they said in 2018, intra-African trade, intra-African exports were valued around $74 billion, of which only 15% of that was Africa's world exports. And between 2017 and 2018, this increased only by 1%. Now, while Africa's export to the rest of the world increased by 22%. So clearly you can see here, there has been more export to the rest of the world rather than within the continent by country to country. So evidently, there has been too little trade across the continent between country to country. So the reduction or complete removal of tariffs and non-tariff barriers by the FCTA is important in order to boost intra-African trade. So what does this mean for a businessman or businesswoman in East Africa? This simply means that with this vehicle now, one is able to trade in territories that were previously very difficult to trade in the past for reasons that maybe either tariffs were too high or because of non-tariff barriers that were imposed. Of course, currently we do trade within our regional economic community within the EAC, but now you can actually extend and go beyond the EAC. So the FCTA works as an enabler. I call it as an enabler to businesses to take advantage of trade opportunities across the continent because now you can move goods or you can provide services much more easier and at a much lower cross-border cost than it was before. So this is very helpful when you look at scaling East African businesses. And I would say especially for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And why them in particular? Because in many cases, because they are small businesses, they tend not to have the financial muscle or the skilled resources in order to navigate through the trade barriers that are there. They may not have the finance to hire lawyers, to do the research and so forth. So this is what the FCTA actually looks at addressing in order to level the playground for everyone to be able to play in. I would also want to touch on disputes. One can expect disputes to arise. All right, and so the way I look at the FCTA is that it results in similar regulations and procedures, which on its own is a huge step toward dispute resolution. And why is that? Because now there is a creation of common ground, unified understanding amongst the member countries across the continent. It creates a forum where different states can interact on plain ground, lead to reduction in time that is needed to actually resolve the disputes that arise, or even prevent the same from emerging in the same place. So the FCTA it also does have a mechanism for state-to-state dispute resolution. So in case there is a dispute, it does provide that mechanism. So what I see is very important here is that disputes are resolved in a timely manner, the shortest possible time, to ensure that trade is not halted or prolonged for longer periods. Otherwise, that can also become another barrier on its own.
All right. Thank you very much, Shani. And I want to bring in Agnes Gitau, because Shani, you've mentioned how Africa Continental Free Trade Area, reducing the non-tariff barriers that we see hindering trade, not only within the East African bloc, but the whole continent. Agnes, I mean, looking now specifically at opportunities, what are the investment opportunities within the East African region that people can take advantage of from out their financials, and give us that comparison with the developed world, and what mechanisms are there within the region to support investment into these opportunities? Agnes.
Thank you very much, Noah, for that. It's always exciting to speak about opportunities. Where do I start? The region, despite the pandemic, is going to record the fastest growth in the continent. And some of the business trends we have noticed, particularly post-COVID, are trends in tech-based businesses. So investment in healthcare, investment in fintech, and I think Kuria mentioned the financial technology. The region is well known for its innovation. We've seen huge investment in the region. One of the reports I was reading earlier suggests that to date, the region has attracted over $400 million just to tech-based sectors. So that's one of the most, in my view, one of the unique sectors that is attracting investors looking for yield, looking at this sector. And most importantly, that these sectors are young people coming up with innovative ideas to respond to the challenges in the region, particularly the healthcare. We also see technology companies, insurance sector. I was reading about an interesting technology company in construction, something you will never even imagine of that is in Uganda, so in Ethiopia, called Con Digital. There's also investment in waste management, transforming waste to energy. So there's an array of opportunities, particularly in the tech-based industries. But if you move a little bit further, the region is well known for latest discoveries of oil and gas. We talk about Tanzania and Uganda. They are building a pipeline worth $3.5 billion. So that's also unique, because if you compare to developed economies, nobody's building pipeline at the moment. The discoveries of liquid gas in Mozambique, which has attracted, despite the instability there, this has attracted investment worth over $50 billion. So for the big investors, particularly in financial centers like BVI, if you're looking for a return, these are sectors that are really coming up from the region. Again, one of the attractions for East Africa is the fact that our infrastructure is not very well developed. So our governments are working together to invest in infrastructure, which in return encourages economic activity, and we see mushrooming of new businesses. So infrastructure sectors, building our rails, airports. So this is another area. And we've also seen coordination amongst, particularly the first EAC country, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. We've seen coordination amongst the regional governments working together to address the infrastructure deficit in the region. So that's another area. But for small investors, I think also regional investors, I see most of the participants here are from the region. So there are great opportunities in small businesses, SMEs looking to expand, as the earlier panelists mentioned, looking to expand into take advantage of the free continental trade area. So these are another area for investment. So a lot of investment, and I keep saying the region is always inviting investment, particularly in job creating sectors. And also what I've noted in the last 1 year, we've seen a lot of interest, particularly with investors interested in impact-based sectors. So sectors that are associated with, which look towards conserving the environment. So a lot of opportunities in that sector. So impact, technology, infrastructure, financial services. The financial services sector in the region is very well integrated. They've already taken advantage of the East Africa region. So we've seen banks in Kenya operating in Uganda, Tanzania. Again, opportunities in listed companies in our exchanges. If anybody is interested in those areas. So Noah, that's just a brief, but happy to engage further on specific sectors.
Definitely. I mean, you've touched on tech. Tech is at the heart of everything right now. Actually, yesterday, we've seen of the past year, locally in Kenya, for example, we've seen the formation of Kenya Pension Funds Investment Consortium. So even locally, we're looking at opportunities that we can pull, because that crowding effect, that pulling effect also can transform this region. And you're saying pension funds also coming together and putting their money in infrastructure, which is a vibrant space for the East African region. But I want to bring in Isaac Lupokela, who's the head of finance, Tanga Cement. You are in manufacturing. And I believe locally, for example, in Kenya, during the pandemic period, we saw the construction sector experience a spike, a growth. And you are in cement. So talking about businesses, as they scale up, because today we're talking about businesses scaling up. How can these businesses mitigate risks to support their goals through innovative services such as corporate structure solution? Isaac.
Thank you very much, Noah, for the good question. And basically, I think I should first of all thank the previous speakers, because they pointed out very valid points about opportunities in Africa, in East Africa, the growth of so many sectors in East Africa, like Agnes just pointed out, the issue of infrastructure. I think the key question to ask ourselves is, yes, the businesses are growing, but what about the sustainability for these businesses going forward? And that actually brings us to the issue of risks that are associated with these operations. And from practical experience, I think as businesses grow up, so many risks are actually coming up. And to mention a very few, you talk of the reputational risk, you talk of the financial risk, but also you talk of the commercial risks. Now, these are happening. as you strive to run and to improve your businesses, you should also be aware of the fact that risks are there. So then, because we need to do businesses, we need to develop our economies. What is next? So this should brings us to the issue of corporate governance. I think this is the cornerstone for risk mitigation in any company that is operating. And the role of corporate governance should actually start with the body that is in charge of the governance of the company, because there is where now we are setting the tone from the top. So the board of directors for the companies must be aware of the risks that are happening in the business operations. And actually, the board should give a leadership role when it comes to risks and risk mitigation. So we should expect, first of all, to have a very competent board of directors for the company. And when you're talking of competence, you're talking of the technical competence, but also you should not undermine the fact that the board also needs to be aware of what is happening in the day-to-day running of the operations of different companies. Because from there is when now the board can give advice or can give some sort of direction to the management on what to be done and what not to be done. And when you talk of the effectiveness of the board for East Africa, I think it's a very critical thing, because we know that sometimes the board members are political figures, which actually at some point in time do not add value into the operations. And therefore, it reaches a point whereby the businesses do not see the risks that are happening simply because they are not very directed. So I think having a very competent and a very involving board is very important. But also we should come to the role of management, who are actually in the day-to-day operations of the companies. Now here we talk of the systems, controls, procedures, and everything that is taking place. And as you are aware of the fact that now there is a lot in terms of technological innovation, and therefore there are so many risks that are now coming up simply because the technology is moving so fast, and therefore our businesses also need to move very fast, to keep the pace of technological innovation. Now, while this is happening, we should also expect that the workforce, the management and the workforce are also able and competent to run operations as the business grow as fast as possible. So we also need to see our people are very skillful. We should also see our people are getting trainings that are very relevant in terms of sharpening their skills and their knowledge. So linking up the role of the board and the role of the management and the workforce is where now we can have a very strong and competent team that is working towards ensuring that we are not getting or we're not trapped into some sort of risks that are happening in the day-to-day operations of our businesses. But also I think we should also appreciate the fact that the business is moving so fast, and the fact that competition is very stiff out there. And therefore, you have two options. You either change and they remain relevant in the market, or you don't change and then you're kicked off in the market. We have so many good stories like Nokia, like Kodak. So when you are moving so fast in terms of running our businesses, we should also not undermine the fact that reputation risks are there. We know the corporate scandal that are happening. And therefore, we should ensure that our systems, our processes, our procedures, our governance structure is superb to the extent of identifying and mitigating risks. I think that's what I can share now. But I'm up to the questions as they will arrive. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Isaac. And on the same breath, I want to bring in Matthew. Matthew, Isaac has mentioned the issue of risk and how we can mitigate that. And he says, corporate governance is at the heart of this. If we are to innovate, we shall take a look at that. From your assessment, what other areas could businesses be very keen in terms of risk mitigation, especially, involving innovation in the corporate structures that we do have to make sure that, our businesses withstand scaling up even for the better. Matthew.
Absolutely. Thanks, Noah. And as Isaac has rightly said, there are a number of risks that a business faces when scaling up and starting to look at trading across border, even within a free trade area where some of those commercial trading risks are mitigated by the nature of the free trade compact. Isaac touched on a number of those risks. Some are hard to manage, others are well within your control. You talk about the need for engaged directors, sharp management skills, and another risk you can control is how your business structure supports those management and those director structures. The basics of corporate structure are probably well understood, but of course, with a limited liability company, you have the ability to ring fence liabilities. You can ring fence contracts within different companies. All of this is pretty clearly understood. But what's less understood, I think, certainly where we have conversations with a number of businesses and lawyers, even on the ground throughout East Africa, is how the options, how the available choices of corporate structure really do drill into this risk mitigation that's so important on for any business trading cross border. There are a number of jurisdictions who've grown up over the years really with a focus on facilitating cross-border trade, and that interdeveloping company trade is as important as the sort of FDI that we see from hedge funds, from pension funds and so on, from Europe, from the UK, from the US into East Africa. Much of the reasons that those types of investors will use BVI, will use other international finance companies in their corporate structuring, operates at any level. So SMEs that are looking to start to trade on a cross-border basis, then all of the same risk mitigation applies. And we've touched on some of this earlier. Nick's looked at the legal and political systems in place. BVI, other neutral jurisdictions are very much grown up around English common law, so they're very familiar legal systems, very familiar judicial systems. But beyond that, we've looked at the neutrality in terms of the level playing field. So when doing business, different business partners, entering into contractual arrangements or even joint ventures, then nobody has a home advantage, and for most of us that's that's pretty key. So looking at BVI in particular, it's a democratic, self-governing overseas territory, very much underpinned by the rule of law. It's a US dollar economy with clear global ties to all the leading trading nations. So in terms of mitigating that country risk, those corporate structures incorporated, formed in BVI, take advantage of that very simple, that very straightforward, familiar common law and neutral political establishment. The regulatory regime, the compliance culture, all very strong. We talked earlier about transparency, and that absolutely underpins BVI's modern operation in terms of a corporate governance centre. So BVI has the same rating as the UK, for example, in terms of compliance with International AML Standards. We've touched a bit on enforcement risk. Things do go wrong. You need to know that the contracts that you've entered into are going to be enforced, and with these neutral jurisdictions, then they do what they say on the tin. The contracts will be enforced. There's very little interference in privity of contract in terms of what parties have already negotiated. And lastly, really just a key point for everybody. Budgets are absolutely key, and we've seen through the pandemic, just how vulnerable some businesses are. The profit margin is obviously key, and these aren't expensive structures. There's obviously two lawyers on this call, but you don't need a lot of lawyering to set these types of structures up. The very way that these jurisdictions have grown up is to make business simple and to make these structures easy to set up, easy to use for business people coming from all sorts of different cultural backgrounds. So we deal with businesses that use these companies from all over the world. They're very cost effective to use relative to some of the local companies, which may be the alternative when you're looking at how to set up. So we can talk about this all day, but all of these factors really do just play into the way that risk is managed on a cross-border basis, even within the confines of a free trade area.
Thank you very much, Marty. And you've mentioned, we have lawyers in this particular panel, which is very important. Nicholas, maybe in the last round of our questions, as a region, the East African region, looking at our legal framework and how we are right now, from your observation, what can we do better other than opting, going for a different jurisdiction which offers neutrality and all these advantages locally to support businesses across just the East African region? What legally needs to be done to align and make things a little bit easier for businesses as they scale up and move into different areas?
Thanks, Noah. Without wishing to tread on Agnes's too, I think she's probably well placed to talk about the local experience. But in sort of more broad general terms, I think not just specific to East Africa, but any jurisdiction, I think what people want to have is certainty of outcome when it comes to, as Matthew pointed out and others, there are risks within any business venture. Things will go wrong, they can. And if you get into a situation where it is leading to or involving litigation, an independent judicial system, transparency of process, due process in that regard, that helps to at least give the parties, the participants in the business environment, that element of certainty as to what will happen in that sort of scenario whereby joint venture partners, for example, have reached a disagreement. How will that be resolved? Can they rely on the judicial system to achieve a fair outcome? And just general transparency in the process as well. I think those are the things that give business confidence. But I wouldn't say it's specific to any particular jurisdiction without wishing to point fingers. I just think it's actually a more general concept in terms of presenting a proposition that gives people that confidence to invest. And I think when you talk about where we sit now as the BVI, looking to invest locally, I think that is one of the things that international investors will focus on. What is the perceived risk of the investment and how can they mitigate that?
Thank you very much. In fact, you've mentioned Agnes. And Agnes, I want to bring you into this because, as we look for certainty of outcome for our investments, especially, the FDIs that we are having into the East African region, for local businesses, even as people invest in them locally, what are the pros and cons when it comes to scaling businesses in the East African region? And also you might touch a little bit on some of the pointers that Nicholas has put across on what we can do better locally to create an enabling environment for businesses scaling up. Agnes.
Thank you, Noah. You're absolutely, Nicholas was absolutely right. Certainty and predictability of policies, predictable policies that a business can take to the bank. I think that's key. And also building our legal capacity. I think it's very important that investors know when a dispute arises, we have capable lawyers. And I get into dispute with a lot of lawyers when I say we need to build credible capacity within the legal sector in East Africa particularly. And we've done that. We've seen a lot of effort from the private sector, but also the government really trying to encourage lawyers to interact, getting international law firms to interact with our lawyers just to build that capacity. And also one of the weaknesses of our government, they never really use African lawyers. If there's a dispute, you see them looking for international lawyers. And why do they do that? You hire a lawyer who is best capable to represent you. So capacity is one thing, and I think that's an area we need to develop, and also predictability of policies. Businesses need to know that if this government is out in 5 years, they don't have to change the laws. They don't have to go back to square one. So predictability, and I think that comes to governments, particularly in East Africa, ensuring that there is a conducive environment for businesses, not only international businesses, but also local businesses to operate in. So what are the pros of businesses scaling within the region? I don't think there's any cons for businesses to scale. Again, the opportunity that the Africa Free Trade Area gives us, it's a great opportunity for businesses to expand. We've already seen that within the banking sector, particularly also the fintech sector. Banks like Kenya Commercial Bank operates in the couple of countries in the region, Equity Bank. So if we can borrow the success of the financial services, what has enabled this financial services sector to be able to scale and move and expand to other countries in the region? I think if we can use that example to sectors, particularly in the healthcare, hospitality industry. I think it's an opportunity to create employment in the region. It will improve the economic activities in the region and provide jobs, particularly for the young people. And what is required for these businesses to scale? So government's role in ensuring there is infrastructure, also policies. I keep talking about policies because it's key. And I keep referring to this statement that a lot of East Africans have invested locally. And I think that gives international investors the confidence to come to our market. Another area I think we've seen that is growing is that our governments are championing the region as a financial hub. I don't know whether it will be a competition to BVI. We've seen Kigali International Financial Center, Nairobi has a center. What can we do to scale that? We are also ensuring that businesses have confidence. We have the Kigali International Arbitration Center, we have the Mauritius Arbitration Center. So there is a lot of movement within our region to ensure that we have the structures that give businesses opportunities, give businesses the confidence to be in our region. Finance, what is required for a business in Nairobi or Tanzania to scale? One of the biggest challenges for a region, and Matthew, you had me talk about this, lack of access, affordable finance to scale. I don't think that's a challenge just for businesses in our region, but I think it's across the region. How can we ensure, or how can we give financial services the confidence to finance our businesses? The Africa Development Bank estimates there is a deficit of about $91 billion in trade finance, and these particularly affect the small businesses that Isaac touched on, or Shani touched on, the fact that small businesses, if we can champion them and encourage them, support them so that they can be able to take advantage of the free trade, the vision of an integrated continent. I think accessing finance, I guess that's a role for BVI to support our region. How can you rally investors, particularly to financial services or to the DFI, so they can lend to businesses so they're able to scale into the region? Again, perhaps one of the things that Isaac has touched on is when businesses expand, more is expected of them. So their corporate structure, governance, use the same standards that as you would in your home country. Don't expect that you're moving to a smaller country, you can take advantage of the environment. So ESG standards ensure that they are implemented and corporate governance, and also, and I keep telling businesses in East Africa about this, do what you do business. Don't get involved in the politics of the region. If you focus on doing business, you leave the politics to the politician, I think our region will do very well.
Thank you very much. Important, quite a critical point right there. Do business. Politics is quite a different discussion, especially when you talk about East Africa. But I want to bring in Shani. I mean, Shani, quite a number of pointers have been covered in regards to businesses. But now speaking, we have addressed quite a number of external factors that, the legal, streamlining to make sure that we are legally equipped to handle investment and creating that environment. But for these businesses, for these SMEs that are looking for funding, for these SMEs that are looking to scale up, I mean, what is the right time to scale up? And if is there a right time to scale up, or what should they do to put themselves in a better position when it comes to growing as a business? Shani.
Thank you, Noah. Taking up from where my colleagues have stopped, just to start, one thing that I want to add on to what Agnes and Nicholas, who touched on the legal framework. Another thing that businesses look for is timeliness of decisions. So the legal framework must also address issues in a timely manner, so that businesses can continue. So businesses, what I would say, the first thing is that, and in the context of the FCTA, is that businesses should understand what the FCTA actually means for them, to understand the agreements that have been entered into, to understand the protocols that are there. That is the first thing. Understand and know the market that you actually want to play in. What products do you want to export? Or let's say, once you have decided that, I need to consider what are the barriers that are there on the particular products that you want to export or not. And if those barriers are there, how are they being resolved? So that bit of information is very important for business to understand. What you tend to see quite often is that, and this happens quite often for smaller businesses that are upcoming, is that you get into the business without really understanding what barriers that could be there, and then you face those barriers. That becomes a challenging for the business. So it's important to really understand, and this is why the FTA does provide that. In fact, information is available. If you want to know what barriers are, for example, in a particular country, you can easily go to the website and see, okay, there is a barrier on this product and how it is addressed. You can get all that information. So it is time for businesses to learn to first understand the particular environment that they want to venture into and the product that they want to export or import, to understand the barriers. Another thing is that businesses also need to, though some businesses may wish to go and produce in different jurisdictions. You may have a business that has grown, for example, operating in Tanzania and wants to scale up to go into Kenya. It is important to understand what's happening in Kenya, understand the legal framework in Kenya, understand what incentives are there, understand what the tax policies are there. So that kind of information is very important. And now, when you now look at what time it takes for business to actually grow and also to become profitable, so that may also depend from the type of business that you're engaged into. But ideally, one can say, looking at 3 to 5 or 6 years, one should actually, if you operate based on the principles, you should be able actually to to break even, or that should be the payback period for your business. So the opportunities are there. I would encourage business to actually take these opportunities, but very important, understand and know what type of business you want to go into, what products you want to export, and also understand the legal frameworks that are there. Thank you.
Definitely very important. They say that knowledge is power. And actually, it's power when you convert that knowledge into something practical. I see we have actually 6 minutes to the top of the hour. So, Isaac, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, unfortunately, as we close up. You know, it's been said that businesses have to understand the areas they're operating in. For businesses in the East African region, we understand, for example, the telecom sector. We've seen elements of, you know, monopoly, where we have very big players, and for small players it becomes very, very hard. I mean, should this be a concern for businesses and also investors coming into avenues that are maybe overcrowded by one individual, you know, or one company that it's sort of monopoly? Should that be a concern, Isaac?
Thank you, Noah. I think to answer you straight, I'll say it's not a concern. And that is simply because, you know, we have regulators who are actually regulating day-to-day operations of companies. And most importantly, we have the Fair Competition Commission around East Africa. So I know Tanzania will have the Fair Competition Commission, which I'm also sure that even other countries in East Africa. So by having regulators actually is to ensure that there is a fair play in the market. So it is to protect the consumers, but at the same time is to protect the players. So that shouldn't be a big concern. The only concern should be on the strategies on how you're going to get there, your penetration strategies, while at the same time remaining compliant in terms of all that is required for you to be registered and for you to operate. That is the most important thing, Noah. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Isaac. And as we finish up, Matthew, you sort of are wrapping up the plenary session. As we finish up, I mean, what should be the greatest takeaways from an expert's perspective? What should be the greatest takeaway from this conversation and you listening in? What are those key pointers that businesses should take note of and try after this particular session, reach out to you guys and also see ways of implementing in brief as we close our plenary?
It's an excellent question. I think it's been a really insightful discussion. It's been really interesting for me to listen to you know, what Isaac and Shani and Agnes have to say in particular. You know, it's always good for the lawyers to sit back and listen and not over talk the people that actually do the real business and take the real risks. You know, we've talked about risk mitigation. You know, there's obviously a lot of opportunities out there. You know, it's an area, you know, that's well known for you know, the potential around innovation. You know, there's a lot of nimble businesses there. There's a lot of clever people. You know, the opportunity to use, you know, fintech means, you know, barriers open up that previously weren't available. You know, businesses that are, you know, even quite small starting up can be, you know, become very visible, can, you know, really start to trade on a very you know, broad basis using the technology that's, you know, readily available and just wasn't there, you know, not many years back. You know, we've talked about, you know, the need to do your research and understand your markets, and, you know, again, that comes down to you know, the technology of make that information available. You know, the websites these days are excellent. The information's available. You know, as I think Shani said, you know, you need to look into the markets that you're going into and understand what the barriers are. You know, and sharpen the skills of management, which I think was you know, an excellent point. You know, this all comes down to the people, and you know, their training and ability, and entrepreneurship, and that needs investment, it needs time, but it also needs the right attitude, and that's clearly there. And just engagement, between the private sector, the public sector. There's obviously some way to go in terms of simplifying laws. It's absolutely crucial that there is that engagement, there's those consultations, and it's important for everyone with a vested interest to take part in those discussions, and just continue to break down barriers, and take advantage of all the opportunities and trade that's available.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Marty, for that sort of summary of what you've touched on. And I'm seeing at the Q&A area, we have that option. If you have any questions to our participants, please feel free to shoot your question, and you can address to an individual specifically here on the panel so that they can address some of your concerns. Remember, after the Q&A session, we'll have sort of a BVI presentation just to look at the opportunities and how you can take advantage and what you can take away from this particular session. I know earlier on, one of the questions that we tried to avoid was the issue of cryptocurrency. And, Agnes, we were chatting, and, you said that is not a huge concern as we speak right now in the East African region. But we are seeing like crypto is really growing, which is quite interesting. The question is, for Africa as a continent as a whole, should we be paying attention lest we are left behind by this crypto, train that is taking off? Briefly, who can jump on that? I see Shani, you've raised your hand.
Noah, it is, what I will say is cryptocurrency is there. Agnes has rightly put it that it does not have much attention now, but I would say it is really something that to think of in a sense that because we are in a global village, so at some stage it is going to come, at some stage it is going to be reality in our regions. So it is really something to actually, I would say, for government to actually start thinking about it and then see how it can be managed. In a sense that at the end of the day, you do want to minimize the risk or to manage the risk. So it is better that way than to actually ignore it, because when it actually comes and when those activities increase, then how do you proceed from there? So I really think it is something that needs to be thought of and to see how it can actually be managed, because I don't think it's going to go away.
All right, quite optimistic right there. It's going nowhere. Crypto is going nowhere. Well, with that said and done, if we don't have, because we haven't gotten any set of questions to our panelists, I think it is proper and good for us to take a look at one of the videos from BVI Finance. Can we have the video play right now before we have our closing remarks, Khushbu?
The global economy is powered by millions of cross-border investments and transactions. International finance centers like London, Shanghai, and Tokyo facilitate this activity. They, in turn, are supported by specialist centers like Hong Kong, Singapore, and the British Virgin Islands. The BVI maintains a balanced and sustainable economy with tourism and business and financial services as the main pillars. The BVI's legal framework and its corporate structures enable investors from different countries and territories to combine their money for investments across the world within a system governed by English common law. The jurisdiction has modern and efficient company legislation tailored to the needs of global businesses. This exists within an infrastructure of other services provided by a group of expert professionals, including specialists in funds, trusts, and in corporations. If disputes arise, the BVI has the capacity and capability to address these through the Eastern Caribbean Commercial Court. As an alternative, organizations and individuals have access to the International Arbitration Center, which includes a roster of more than 190 highly regarded legal practitioners. For many years, the BVI has been an effective partner with all relevant international regulators. It compares favorably with other jurisdictions, including members of the G20, on international standards for transparency, tax information exchange, and anti-money laundering. Those investing in cross-border ventures pay taxes where they reside and where they invest. People choose to use the BVI because the government does not add an extra layer of tax on these investments. So while a company or individual may not have to pay extra taxes in the BVI, they may still have to pay wherever they are a resident for tax purposes. This tax neutrality helps lower the cost of making cross-border investments. And without it, there is a risk that some simply would not happen. International finance makes a significant difference to the lives of people across the world. These substantial cross-border investments provide the underlying finance that enables tangible investments in homes, factories, telecoms, broadband, and machinery. The BVI's Business and Finance Center is an integral part in the global economy. It powers more than $1.5 trillion of investment. It helps generate $15 billion of tax revenue for governments across the world and supports 2.2 million jobs. By balancing the requirements of private sector investors with a rigorous approach to regulation, the BVI sets the gold standard for business and financial services.
All right. There is the summary of what BVI has to offer, the advantages of operating in that jurisdiction. With that said, earlier on I had said we didn't have any questions, but I see we have a question. So these will go hand in hand with our closing remarks. So I'll start with Isaac, with whom the question has been directed to. As you do your closing remarks, Isaac, from the experience you have in the cement manufacturing industry, where does you see the possibilities of having a price regulator in this particular industry? Answer that particular question from Deborah Kihaka as you give your closing remarks. Isaac.
Thank you very much, Noah. I think this is a very tricky question, especially to me, because, you know, I'm not in the government. I think they are the best place to respond to this. But I think fairly, I would say price regulation is an economic policy where the government sees there are issues in terms of how the manufacturers or how, you know, the suppliers are selling their products at. But with the regulation that we so far have, like you talk of the FCC, which is there to protect the interests of the consumers as well as the players, but also talking of different government departments, I think it's not something that's going to happen anytime soon, because there haven't been really bigger concerns in terms of cement prices in Tanzania specifically. And this is contributed much by having two bigger players, which are listed companies. And therefore, it's very easy for the regulators to work out the numbers and arrive at the cost of production and see if the price that is being charged is fair or not fair. But for industries whereby the companies are private and sometimes getting public information is not possible until when the government does a very special audit or investigation, then I think we might end up there. But for now, I should say for cement, I don't think it coming very time soon. But also, I think the government might have their plans, which I cannot talk of them.
Okay, I see there is a hand up. Agnes, you wanted to address something. Your hand was up. Kindly You can shoot even as you do your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Friday, for noting that. I raised earlier when you were asking the crypto question, but Shani already addressed the issues on crypto. But maybe quickly to add that the president of Tanzania, Her Excellency Madam Hussein, Samia Hussein, that's her name, right? Samia Hussein. I could be so, if I got it wrong, I'm sure Shani and Isaac will probably never talk to me, has indicated that government must, as Shani said, and I think that's maybe why Shani has that incline to cryptos, has indicated that the government are keen to investigate and understand the crypto world. In Kenya, where I come from, the regulator it's a no-no, but you're absolutely right. The private sector is innovative. They'll find a way of engaging in cryptocurrency. And if businesses find an efficient way of doing business and saving their money, I'm sure they will. I was just reading yesterday the Nigeria population. You saw Nigeria central bank launched the e-Naira, and that's a way of making sure they have a control of the market. And about 32% of Nigerian population use Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So that's quite interesting. I don't know how much in the East African region we do, but yes, you're right. We can't ignore it. We have to engage, but we also have to make sure we have regulation so that we can protect the consumers. My closing remarks really would be the East African region is home to multinationals. We have incredible opportunities. If you look from Djibouti, the logistics sector, to Mozambique, the liquid natural gas, to Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, with a very diversified services sector. The only challenge for us is the politics. We get the politics wrong. If we can get the politics right, ensure that our governments understand the value of stable politics to engage investment, I think we'll do very well. And I know the region is going to record positive growth in 2021, 2022. However, we have to make that sustainable. We have so much resources, so much wealth, if only we can protect that. But the region is open for investments. The private sector is very well engaged, and we are happy to engage with BVI investors or anybody else to show you how you can navigate or add value to our region. Thank you very much.
Awesome. What a call to action, right there by Agnes Gitau. And I know, Shani, you mentioned, and you also followed up with a hand raised. I hope the pronunciation and the naming of President Suluhu is not off key. It was properly done. So as you give your feedback, kindly sum it up with your parting shot as we finish up, Shani.
Thank you, Noah. Agnes rightly said that our president best that it is something that should be looked at. Madam Samia Suluhu Hassan, so you were there. So I just want to say that also to the question that was raised to Isaac in terms of price regulations. Ideally, one does expect that prices should be determined by the market itself. The forces of demand and supply, that's what should determine the prices. And as we are talking of the FTA, ideally price when you start having, start regulating prices in a sense, controlling price, that on its own can also turn out to become a barrier. So let the market determine the prices that are there. So my closing remarks is that once again, I mean, this is a very, very good opportunity for East African businesses. You know, so my recommendation is that with the support from the governments, businesses should actually take this opportunity in order to be able to grow beyond the East African region. Otherwise, thank you very much, Noah, and the African Review team, BVI. It has been a very, very good time to actually sit and have this discussion. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Shani. And even as I come to Matthew, there is a sort of a question which we will wrap up. You've realized that's the new trend where we wrap up, we respond and give our parting shot. So Gandalf has pointed something about Tanzania. And I think this will cut across the different nations where project finance in TZ, Tanzania has not embraced fully yet, and those who embark on charge high interest rate. What are the efforts to facilitate more international financing in locally designed and originated projects? And is there special efforts to motivate local banks and financiers to engage in these projects? I know Matthew said with being a lawyer, you like to sit back, but in terms of international financiers, coming into a different jurisdictions like East Africa, is there an effort to make sure that the solutions are sort of localized, are designed locally to make these investments more, better and easier for the region? Matthew.
Thanks, Noah. I think the need to attract finance, on decent terms is well understood. I mean, we've a banker on the call who can talk more knowledgeably than I, but I think in terms of what we've talked about, presenting the right proposition to banks is going to be compelling, and there are so many elements to that. We've talked about one of the key, which is the management structure and the directors, and their skills, experience, expertise, and sharpening those to be able to present to potential finance and potential investors, as to whether that's international or local finance or a combination of those. I mean, when an investment appealing to the financiers, then things do tend to fall into place, not without a little effort on all parts. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm not sure we want to get too much into detail on that, unless Shani has anything to add from a sort of banking perspective. But
yeah,
in terms of what we've talked about, this afternoon, really the engagement, the energy, it's all there, and let's just break down these barriers and carry on, working together more and more closely across borders.
All right, thank you, Matthew, and I think you've pointed it out very well. Shani had already given us his bye-byes. In Kenya, when you're hanging out with your friends, especially males, or men, we say bye like 5 times. Yeah, I'll see you. Then you continue making stories. And I don't want that to be the situation here. We want to close. But Shani, since you're from the banking sector, this issue of is there an effort to motivate local banks and financiers to engage in these projects? Because we've seen in Kenya locally, my observation as a business journalist, that banks are very risk averse, so they prefer, putting their money with the government in government bonds and whatnot, other than investing in the much needed sector or space of the small and medium-sized enterprises. So what is your response as we finish?
All right, just to pick up from where Matthew has left, is that the governments are making efforts, because if you want a business to grow, you have got to provide finance, right? And financial institution banks are there to provide finances. If you don't provide finances to the micro, small, medium enterprises, they will not grow. So there are mechanisms that are used, for example, and I can give you an example of recently, is that there has been a circular issued by the Bank of Tanzania. And this is also in order to ensure that there is a finance that is going to the private sector, whereby actually is that you can they've provided funds of about 1 trillion shillings that can be accessible by banks, and those funds are to be provided as finance, for example, to the agricultural sector at an interest rate of 10%, and these funds have been availed at an interest of 3% to the bank. So those are some of the efforts that governments are actually taking ensure that actually funds are channeled to also to our smaller business in order to help them to scale up. So I'll end at that point. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, I have to say, Nicholas Korea, Council, Conyers, Shani Kinswaga CFO, Exim Bank, Agnes Gitang, partner, GBS Africa. So many opportunities in the East Africa region, as you've noted out. Isaac Lubukela from Tanga Cement. I really appreciate your time here. Marty Gilbert, the partner at Maples Group. Gentlemen, lady, really appreciate your time and input, but in the interest of time, we have to close it up. And our avid listeners and participants in this particular forum, we appreciate also you taking time to come in on this space and learn something. But remember, the conversation doesn't stop here. We move past the webinars, we actualize, we exchange contacts. That's how we effect change on the ground. My name is Noki Kimboy. I'm a journalist with a Standard Media Group in Kenya. And it's been an honor moderating this particular session and plenary. And engaging with all of you, I've really learned a lot. And I hope the interaction doesn't stop here. Well, Africa Review of Business and Technology in association with the BVI Finance, we appreciate you also putting this together. With that said, have yourself a good afternoon, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.